Hello, and welcome back to the Boston Commune. This week's Incredulous installment will feature commentary from Comrade Scott, Joe, Ellie, Kit, and myself. We will cover the current conservative COVID conundrum, and as promised, in the second half dive deep into the tumultuous topic of gender. Please do us a favor and share this content. Do yourself a favor and enjoy your Epoch.
Marianne Williamson is apparently starting a podcast.
The orb of incredulity.
Orb hour. I don't want to poop. Fuck, now that's stuck in my head. Thanks.
Okay. And action.
You better choke me out.
Okay, for real this time, and action.
Fuck, I didn't have one fast enough for that one. We usually just Joe off into the we usually Joe off. It's what we usually do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have some current events, so Joe off.
It's you joeing off.
I'm not Joeing off.
Joe,
do you have Joes to Joe off on?
Yeah.
Joe, I guess Joes are news stories.
I have several Joes to report. So, an update on Armenia and Azerbaijan. Conflict is still raging on, and now the Armenians are claiming that the Azerbaijanis are committing war crimes by bombing civilians, and both sides are shelling population centers. So that is...
Yeah, I would call that a war crime. That's what that is. So
that's kind of what's happening. And about 400 people have died so far, which is kind of a lot of people in the past week, considering the fact that this is it's not like a full-out war just yet. It's more of a border skirmish kind of thing that's going on for a protracted basis. And it doesn't really seem like it's going to be resolved just yet, but here's to hoping. Also, the House Judiciary Committee came out with a huge report, a 16-month-long report, 500 pages long, with the conclusion that Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google are monopolies that must be restricted and regulated.
Evil cunts.
According to the report, the companies...
Okay, that fell on deaf ears. Sorry.
I was trying not to laugh over it.
I would be laughing, but
the
I'm
point
also
is
eating
you're
pizza.
supposed to laugh.
I'm laughing quietly into my pizza on my
the point is that you're
microphone.
supposed to be fucking laughing at the funny things that I do on the show, Joe. But that's okay.
It was very funny. Right there, I could laugh.
Troll-looking fucking horrible-looking beasts.
Fuck. So the report states that the four companies, quote, wield their dominance in ways that erode entrepreneurship, degrade Americans' privacy online, and undermine the vibrancy of the free and diverse press. The result is fewer choices for consumer and a weakened democracy. It's kind of limp dish rag in my opinion because it doesn't go far enough. But hey, this is progress.
Dish rag.
Like limp dick, basically.
Limp biscuit.
It's very flaccid.
You better choke me out.
Chocolate starfish.
I just don't think it goes far enough to condemn monopolist corporations because in my opinion they should just be either nationalized or nationalized. I don't really think antitrust is as effective as more the Brandisians like to think it is.
I just want to have it on the record that Carlene just brought me a snack pack and a spoon.
Oh fuck yeah!
Get your snack packs.
That rocks. That's some sweet shit.
Best girlfriend ever.
Really impressive how shitty it is.
The report actually does condemn Amazon and accuse it of monopolizing the online retail market, where 37% of the 2.3 million sellers who do business on Amazon's platform rely exclusively on Amazon for income. And Amazon is also accused of harvesting data on consumer shopping habits to offer its own competing products at lower prices. Whereas Apple is accused accused of dominating the distribution of software by controlling what apps are allowed on iOS devices. The investigation cited that Apple favors its own services by pre-installing them onto iPhones and disadvantages its competitors by charging them as much as 30% in commission fees. And the allegations against Facebook are twofold: that the company dominates both social networking and online advertising. Facebook's monopoly over social media is, quote, firmly entrenched, according to the report. And as of last December, the Facebook app has had more than 200 million in the United States alone, reaching 74% of smartphone users.
Like I said,
Evil cunts.
it's bad people. Joe, you want to get into the big news, though?
Yeah, Joe, continue joeing off.
The big news is that basically everybody's got COVID in the last week. It's hilarious.
Bye.
So-
Go home to mommy.
Scott.
Go home to mommy.
Scott.
Yes, sir.
Stop.
Okay.
Yeah, too much. I wanted to discuss Schadenfreude, specifically the Schadenfreude I'm feeling at basically everyone in the White House getting COVID in the past 5 days.
Fuck them.
Correct, that's the correct take.
Apparently, Trump had the COVID during the debate, so that's just hilarious to me. He's been hiding it.
Did you see that photo of like Jamie Harrison last week? He did a Senate debate against Lindsey Graham, and he brought his own like plexiglass case to encase himself in during the debate, so to reduce the likelihood of getting COVID while debating Lindsey Graham.
That's kind of sad and probably a good idea and also really freaky.
I was tempted to include in my Rabid Radlib.
Rabid Radlibs.
Yes, I was tempted to include in my segment the ongoing... I haven't even actually seen it personally, but I've seen a lot of people complaining about liberals, like, trying to fucking rope leftists in who are talking about how great it would be if, like, Trump and his cronies died of coronavirus.
Yes.
It's not even worth...
Because this is something I want to talk about, too, so go on.
Yeah, it's like not even... I don't need to do some kind of dialectical materialist analysis of why that's a stupid fucking thing to say. Like, of course, it would be great if he died. That would be hilarious. I think that would be hilarious. It's okay to think that's funny, because that's funny.
Primarily, I think it's funny myself, yes.
I find it annoying that the libs have been like, for the last 4 or 5 years, that like, oh, he's like Hitler, basically. Be like, oh... We also wish Hitler, We wish Hitler the speediest possible recovery, and that he gets back to power as soon as possible. But he's Hitler. But we also wish that he gets back to power.
Exactly. That all of these, like, it's all of the people who have been saying for 4 years, like, Trump's a danger to our democracy. Trump's the next Hitler. We have to get him out of power. We have to, like, through impeachment. However the fuck, whatever. Like, and then the second he gets sick, everyone's like, "Oh, get better, Mr. President." And it's like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? And it's
I don't
you
know
people
if
want to have
like,
the media jobs. You don't actually give a fuck.
I don't know if they're trying to be like all of a sudden like, oh well, if we wish that he died, we're sinking to his level. It's like, well, yeah, but you might as well because he's there already.
It's just the meme where on one side it's a Nazi saying "die," and then on the other side it's someone going "no," and then the third panel is they're the same.
You
Die.
gotta hear both sides on this issue.
It's German for the. That's German for the Bart the.
That was pretty funny.
I think it is actually kind of weird, though, because in our normal lives, like, people don't deserve to get sick. Like, there's not really that much that a person, I don't know, living close to me could do. And even if they're irresponsible and go eat outside in Harvard without a mask, they don't, like, deserve pandemic to happen to them. There's really only one person who really deserves that. And deserve is not the model of justice I want. And it's really hard to switch between, oh, yeah, no, the people who are homeless and struggling to find a place to eat in Harvard Square getting COVID because they weren't wearing masks versus like, oh my gosh, you had so much power and you did what with it? Getting sick.
Especially when you consider that, like, he went to Walter Reed, he had 10 doctors, and nobody on the face of the earth is going to get that level of care.
Right.
Like, it's just and you're right. Like, it kind of like it is kind of a deserved thing on Trump's part, but it's like we really shouldn't be thinking that way.
It feels very appropriate, you know, like the man is so powerful. He's
Actually,
like
that's the perfect word.
arguably the most powerful man in the world, and like he's gotten there through just absolute shit hat baggery. I don't know, that's my word for today. And like, if anything, I don't know, I'm sure he tells himself every day that he's invincible, and this is just great because it's like the one thing that could, no, you're still a pile of meat that has lungs and blood vessels, which COVID is going to make all leaky. I stopped reading things about COVID because it's so gruesome.
Well, I mean, like when his doctors were talking the other day, when they were giving their like little press release, like they asked like the effect that it's going to have on Trump's lungs, and the guy didn't answer the question. So
Seriously?
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Ooh.
He was like really bad at it. Like it was. Really
he invoked
obvious that he was
HIPAA.
lying.
Like he was so extreme about not answering the question that he invoked HIPAA. Like Trump's lungs are fucked.
Like he's like 74 and he's obese. Those are like the two top comorbidities for this.
I don't want to focus on Donald Trump, honestly. Like, I really don't think it's useful to focus on Donald Trump as like an individual because he's just like a Republican. Like he is,
And arguably not even that.
he's like the icon of the modern Republican Party. Like, yes, the Democrats and Republicans are very similar in that there is no class antagonism. They are unified in their complete embracing of the capitalist system as it exists and the withholding of services from the working class. But the difference between the parties now, aside from the basically two social issues that separate them, which is like God and guns, is the Democratic Party is like an aristocracy and the Republican Party is not. And Donald Trump is just one asshole that chooses to perpetuate these absolutely insane conspiracy theories that don't track with the physical reality of the disease process. So, I mean, Herman Cain in the same fucking boat. Like, what's her name? Who's the new...
The press secretary? The press
Yes.
secretary?
Yes, what's the press
Kaylee,
secretary?
whatever.
Right. She's in the same fucking boat. They're all pretending to be brainless. Like, they kind of embrace this cousin fucker thing. I don't think that's what Republicans actually are. I think Republicans are essentially what I said earlier. Like, they are the exact same as Democrats, but they're a little bit more conservative on social issues. And they're embracing this persona of working class stupidity, and it's backfiring on them. Like, this is completely the result of their own deliberate malfeasance. Because the economy is the only thing that matters. And by that, I mean the stock market is the only
Which
thing that
crashed
matters.
today, by the way.
So it's like, it's
Burn.
not whether they deserve it or not. It's, I don't give a fuck if it kills all of them because they directly created this problem. Like, 100% manufactured this fucking problem. If they had done literally anything differently, if they had intervened at all, if they had given any funding to fucking states, if they had done anything to improve the healthcare infrastructure in this country, if they hadn't actively intervened in the dispersal of personal protective equipment or masks, if they hadn't played the fucking Red Scare card and said, oh, well, we can't do what these other countries do because that would be fucking socialism, and this is a free country and we get to make our own decisions. If they hadn't played up the fucking stupid QAnon bullshit and elected a bunch of absolute psychos in this last election cycle, this wouldn't be the norm. Nearly half of the people who live in this nation are making a choice between should I trust the most watched news source in the fucking country, or should I listen to my shitlib friends who say, actually, science says something else? How bizarre! Like, this dynamic doesn't exist anywhere else except for maybe Brazil. And Bolsonaro's already had COVID like 10 fucking times.
Yeah. Another thing that's important is when this thing started, the USPS wanted to mail everybody masks. And Trump blocked that. So, if you didn't know.
Like, I'm sorry. I don't know anybody in the Republican Party or anybody in the ruling class sympathy for this shit because they all chose the stock market over us. Fuck them.
In the White House who have tested positive in the last couple days. The president, the first lady, Hope Hicks, the senior advisor, Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, Ronna McDaniels, who is the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey,
That one's particularly funny.
Kellyanne Conway,
And her daughter.
and the Joint Chiefs of and most of the senior Pentagon leadership are now in quarantine because a senior leadership figure in the Coast Guard tested positive. So now the Joint Chiefs of Staff and most of the Pentagon leadership are in isolation.
Did you say Bill Barr?
No, Bill Barr is tested negative. Stephen Miller.
Oh, but he's self quarantined right now. Bill Barr. Yes, but then Stephen Miller. Love to hear it.
I honestly hope that he dies, like Stephen Miller, because he's like the worst person in this administration.
It's okay to say these things.
It's an impressive feat to be like the most terrible person in the Trump administration, and he's like the most terrible person by like leaps and bounds. It's almost impressive to be that evil.
Do we want to talk about what Trump said today that connects to the stock market? Basically, Trump tweeted that he has no plans to make any sort of deal on a stimulus package, a second stimulus package to deal with the pandemic. And he's telling McConnell to focus solely on getting Kobe Bryant Barrett onto the Supreme Court, and he's not going to pass any stimuluses whatsoever until after election. So, as a result, the stock market crashed today, and you love to see it because again, like it's like Trump getting COVID, it's like Trump leaving the fucking hospital after a day. It's all of his own making. It's all of his own fucking. It's his own disaster happening in front of him. He made it. He deserves it, and it's okay to mock him because fuck him and fuck all like. You know, he's still like there was some article about like still wanting to like they have no plans to like reduce the number of like people like being held at the border and stuff. So like fuck these people. Like they're still doing evil even when they're like coughing out their lungs. Like, you know, Bolsonaro, he's gotten COVID 7 times now. He's still trying to destroy the fucking rainforest. They're bad.
I think Trump left the hospital prematurely because, like, Boris Johnson, he got COVID several months ago.
Yes!
Well,
he did that on purpose.
I don't know. I don't know.
Boris Johnson's like 10, 15 years younger than Trump.
Trump seems fine. He'll be fine.
Boris Johnson was in like the hospital. He was in the ICU for like 2 weeks and he almost died. He barely survived dealing with COVID, and he's like 15 years younger than Trump is.
And by the way, with Herman Cain didn't die for like 40 days when he got COVID.
3 days before Herman Cain died, his press team or his PR team tweeted like he's doing great. Yeah. He's happy.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't really get sick until 2 weeks into it. And like Trump is not even near 2 weeks yet. Like it's next weekend that Trump's going to be in it. And so we don't know if it's going to take a turn. And if it does, like
he's already
LOL.
There is also a lot of individual variation on how people get COVID. We know the like statistics for people in like age class. It's like, okay, so maybe he has a 15% chance of dying, maybe slightly higher due to weight. There is so much individual variation, and this hits people so differently. There are still elders who don't show very many symptoms, and it seems relatively light for. There are also young people who are dying. I have a 35-year-old friend who is just like coughing her lungs out. That's like age is so far from everything, and this is so not predictable.
The truth is that if we get sick, we have less of an opportunity than these people do. Except for people like me. I'm very fortunate. I have Medicare. If I need treatment, I'll be able to get treatment. But there are plenty of other people who need Medicare and aren't on Medicare, that if they get sick because of the malfeasance or misfeasance of these fucking overlords, who, by the way, are probably very much invested in the medical industry in places like Boston. They want to see as few people utilizing socialized medicine as possible because it means that they'll have, you know, another patio.
You know, Less people to bill.
Yeah, whatever. Less paperwork. I don't know. But even then, I brought this up in the last episode or another episode. Like, the people who do that paperwork comprise something like 80% of the medical industry. Like, it's so inflated with bullshit jobs. There is so much in between the average American and the services that they need. And it's very much manufactured. But it all gets concentrated toward the top.
Do you have any more stories?
I actually have one more story to do. So it's a more local story, but it's still relevant to all of us.
Bring it back home. Bring it local.
Boston.com, well, the Boston Globe via Boston.com is reporting today that the MBTA is discussing cuts to train service, bus service, and ferries due to COVID-19.
Great.
Wonderful.
Do you mean like permanent cuts? When you say due to COVID-19, you mean like beyond, like it's going to last?
The MBTA is trying to use COVID as a justification for cutting services.
Yes.
That is one big pile of shit.
Yeah, that.
Why do we have a Republican governor?
Yeah, what the fuck's up with that shit? Why is it
upper
always
middle
been
class
this?
greed. Upper middle class greed. And I will continue to die on this hill until I no longer have to.
No, I agree with you.
Look at it this way. It's the upper middle class normies who would rather not, like, they're fear-mongered into, like, oh, well, if we get a Democrat, you might have to pay a little bit more in taxes to help the poor people because you're going to be taxed to pay for public services. And this is evidenced by the fact. Yeah, exactly. God forbid the poors, as Bill Maher refers to them, God forbid the poors actually get, like, social services and public services that they actually could be beneficial to society.
Bill Maher refers to the working class as the poor, as, like, ironically?
Unironically.
I hate that guy. Just for the record, I fucking hate Bill Maher. I hate him. Hate him so much.
Dude sucks.
He does. That's an understatement. He sucks so much. So much. So, like, you have the situation where, like, Charlie Baker in 2018, he gets reelected like 68, 69% of the vote. Whereas Liz Warren's getting reelected at 60% of the vote the same cycle. I mean, if that isn't evidence enough that, like, it's upper middle class people who don't want to pay more taxes. We're one of the wealthy states in terms of, like, number of millionaires and, like, average salary by, like, household. We're in, like, the top 3 or 4 states every year on that list.
Recent polling on the general election between Biden and Trump, the people who support Donald Trump, they're not elderly, it's boomers. So, I mean, I don't like to paint any group of society with a broad brush, except for the capitalist class, of course. But if you're talking about age...
It's specifically males 50 to 64.
Exactly.
Boomer males in specific.
That is the group of people that continues to vote for a motherfucker like Charlie Baker year after year.
My dad is a big Charlie Baker guy, and he is a boomer male.
What is he like about Charlie Baker?
I don't even know because, like, that triggers me. So, like, I just go off on him and don't really
Sorry to bring it up.
Why he likes him. Because he'd be like, but tell it to the teachers union that he went to war with 4 years ago. And the fact that he's, like, trying to actively destroy the T.
Oh, you mean Charlie Baker. I thought you meant your dad for a second.
No.
Joe's dad is actively trying to destroy the T with his bare hands.
I just imagine Joe's dad showing up at, like, Haymarket with a rocket launcher. Like, you guys are fucking done.
Just like a hammer. Just like a sledgehammer all by himself. He's just going to take it down one car at a time.
Yeah, so from some canvassing, I have a pretty good idea of what people think they were supporting when they support Baker. There is an idea of elderly proprietary and properness, that he will play by the rules and be nice and comfortable and polite and not, be queer and funky and different and make them deal with anything new. And there is financial austerity in this idea that somehow the state is wasting money and they just really need to stop paying for all this useless shit. And most people don't know what the stuff the state is paying for is. and don't really understand where it goes, how it's used, and our state is really not transparent about it. You don't see the actual battles between Baker and supermajority of Democrats because we don't see them because they're never brought to the floor, they're never voted on and therefore vetoed. You can't tell how people voted. So when Baker says that he's going to veto the Safe Communities Act, then it doesn't get through the community to actually be voted on to be presented to him. So you don't see, Baker also wants to have immigrants locked up rather than let's hurt the poor class rather than hit their employers. What? You don't see that fight, and it's not generally publicized, and it's not things that people know about. The same thing is true for the T. The same thing is true, and T funding is a big issue because it's really complicated. And trying to understand, the big dig was hit on the T, but the T is often a large portion of the T is state funding, but there's also Boston funding in there, and which unions do what and how much everyone is paid. And do we spend more or less on repairs? Because our repairs seem to last a lot longer than other places that do repairs. So well done, T mechanics. I don't understand, but you keep buses going for a long time. You also spend slightly longer on them. And just trying to figure that out is really hard, and most people don't pay attention at all.
MBTA takes a little bit longer is because they've had a financial problem for last 20 years because of the way they were restructured in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Because before the late 80s, early 90s, they were treated as a state-owned enterprise where the T will do whatever it needs to do and the state will basically give them whatever money they need. But now that they don't really have the same financial resources, they barely have enough money to keep up with basic repairs and basic maintenance, so they tend to fall behind.
I think a part of it is that now that the T is it's a public-private partnership, the PPP, right?
Not great, Bob.
It is, and that's
Okay.
horrendous.
Public thing.
All right, so that means that there are people on the board of directors that get to say where that money goes. And obviously, if you have stockholders that are controlling the funds that flow into the T, they're not really on the ground. They're not taking the T every day, I would presume. So it's going to be less efficient.
It's also under the control of what is called the Fiscal Control Management Board, which is basically this board that basically just constantly ramming through austerity. There's also that, which is a product of Charlie Baker.
Yeah, and now that Michelle Wu is running against Charlie Baker, all the more reason to vote for her because she has been more vocal than any other.
Walsh.
Oh yeah. All right, let's go back in time.
I would love to see that though.
Now that Michelle Wu.
I should also clarify a whole bunch of things. So the commuter rails are entirely they're contracted out to private enterprises, including weird things like Wi-Fi and other setups, which are separate private enterprises. The actual base of the T is kind of public, but has its separate bank account and tracking expenditures, and is expected to run almost independently, which it hasn't been. They're the ones that is still public, though it is a separate bank account than how it previously was done. And it's they were storing up in order to make these large changes and repairs. And then the big dig decided to steal all of that for, suburbs get more resources than people who live in the city do. Don't understand. And Boston has an extra control over portions that are actually in the city, not including the public-private commuter stuff.
Okay.
Got any more stories, Joe? Or is that the last one?
Facebook has announced that it will be banning QAnon-themed Facebook groups and Facebook pages as part of a crackdown on QAnon.
Thanks, Zuckerberg.
And that's about it for the news.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Scott, did you have also news items?
The emu story. Who had the emus?
Come up with it, but I thought it was hilarious enough to discuss.
Joe's audio is getting run through the guillotine.
How about now?
Better.
Well, I'll be happy to talk about the emu. I had another thing to talk about too, but the emu can come first.
Is this you can't make this shit up?
It can be if you want.
I want it
Well,
to
do you want it to be?
I want
Yeah.
That's what I want.
This is you can't make this shit up. This is also our bird content of the week. I hope that we continue to have bird content.
I guess it's a thing now.
You can make this shit up with Comrade.
basically in Haverhill, I think this was last week, the animal control got a call about an emu who was running around. The animal control officer that ultimately picked it up and put it in her van lured it by picking a pear from a pear tree in somebody's front yard, and the emu was into the pear, I guess. The thing is that nobody is really sure whose emu it is or where it came from, as local farms told Haverhill police they were not missing a bird. So it is unclear.
This is an incredible story.
I'm very happy about it.
Emus are great escape artists and really, really curious about everything.
Do you feel like you're at home, Kit?
I feel like the emu needs to be a little bit closer than Haverhill to me to like bring that. There's probably a closer emu at a zoo.
Bring the Aussie vibes.
Bring the Aussie vibes, yeah. Also, it did not kick down any houses. It needed to find an outhouse in its like 2 hours of freedom, and it failed.
Yeah, it seems like the mayhem imposed by this emu was very minimal. I think it was just more like, woo, check me out. I'm in Haverhill, the most exciting place for an emu to be.
You have a pet? It's a Chad emu.
It's a Chad emu, yeah. Yeah. So that
everywhere
happened.
is exciting if you're an emu, though. Just like everything needs to be inspected and like approached, and this is totally a win for anarchy, and I will not take it otherwise. It's a win for anarchy, damn it.
I am amazed at the bravery of this animal control officer who is probably used to like poking possums with a shovel or something, and she had to pick up this entire emu.
Kit from the Discord on Sunday. Now, if only the rest of us escape evil overlords and got parrots for our trouble.
Right? Well said.
Like, really?
Did you know about the emu war? I just posted it in the chat.
Tell me about the emu war.
Oh, there was from reading what I can read in the chat from the Wikipedia article, it happened in 1932. There was basically there was a public call to arms. Emus were becoming a quote-unquote nuisance in Australia, and
basically there was an overpopulation of emu at the time, and they tried to kill them. They tried to reduce the population, and the emu just overran them.
Yeah,
and
the emus won the war.
Yeah, the government was just like, this isn't worth it, fuck it. There's too many. We can't kill all of them, and so they just stopped after like a fucking month. They're like, fuck it, it's not worth it.
The emus were fighting in solidarity with their defeated brethren, the cane toads, who definitely did not win their war.
Weren't there yet.
And the Toto.
I have my chronology wrong.
It said that it is also known as the Great Emu War.
The Great Emu War. Yes, it's very good.
Yeah, the emus
they're pretty great. Usually that kind of thing ends in mass extinction, but in this case it just ended in fuck it.
Emus being like, fuck y'all, all of y'all.
The Great Emu Commune.
Alright, I got one other thing. Actually, I have a couple of things, but I don't know if I want to do both of them. Do you guys want to hear about the heavy metal music video that was put out by the Azerbaijani army?
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
What?
Yeah, New York Post is reporting.
Yeah, good. Okay.
The headline that the New York Post is using is Azerbaijan military releases bizarre heavy metal song amid clash with Armenia. And I don't know. Do you guys want to hear it? I could do a quick screen share.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Outtakes, which means fire. And the people singing are not in the Azeri army, is my understanding.
It would seem that your stream is
current events, as we see in the on the sidebar there. Sad day today, Eddie Van Halen.
Died at the age of 65.
Oh, no.
Go listen to Eruption. It's very good. His solo.
It's not actually that weird. I'll just send it to Jesse and he can put a clip of it in there. You know, I guess you could describe it as a heavy metal song. I would defer to Jesse on that because don't have, expertise in that area. But basically, the military of Azerbaijan has released a bizarre heavy metal music video touting their war weapons and featuring lots of explosions amid a violent dispute with Armenia. I feel like there's some cultural context here that I'm missing. I don't really know what it's like to be an average Azeri person and listen to this song, but It's definitely a pretty heavy song, and it's got a lot of tanks in it in the music video and fighter pilots. The New York Post decided to be like, well, the metal rockers look like they're ready for some Megadeth in real life. Azerbaijan.
Is that like an own?
I don't know. I think the New York Post doesn't know what it's talking about. It's out of its depth here. That's just my feel.
That sounds almost like that's like. They're ready to die?
No, they capitalized Megadeth. I don't know. Maybe they're ready to cause other people to die. That's what it seems like. It says that their military
Iran's been doing for the past week.
Yeah. Well, they've been locked in a violent conflict over land with Armenia for years, honestly. I think they released it in the context of this most recent outbreaking of fighting. But the New York Post really wants you to know that in real life, their military is not as powerful as the band's sound.
Okay, here's the band sound just so that we can kind of hear it.
Oklar yurdu doğma diyar Qədim tarix məbədim sənsən Keşiyində sərkərdən var Günəş kimi əbədi sənsən Çox az qalıb zaman çatar Bu dünyada hak yerin tapar
I think that's enough. I'm kind of amused. I understand clean vocals and rough vocals. The snaky stuff, not so much.
Yeah, I gotta say.
Honestly, it kind of sounds like somebody's little brother trying to start a garage band that's trying to emulate Queens of the Stone Age, but not very good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's that. The other thing I wanted to talk about very briefly.
It's not that bad, honestly.
Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty okay.
There's nothing wrong
in a
with
different
it.
context.
It's
I could listen to it.
A bit. I mean, it doesn't have particularly interesting drumline. I don't think it's doing anything particularly noticeable on reverb. It has a pretty standard guitar line. This isn't really highly technical, awesome European metal, and this isn't the way we paid way too much attention to the timbre. Vitra Instruments American metal. It's this other thing that maybe is trying to do its own thing, but what?
I feel like you can do the bouncy triplets if it's sort of ironic, but it doesn't really work when it's supposed to be we are a death machine.
Yeah, that's why I feel like I want more cultural context for this.
The context of we're in the middle of an armed conflict and we're putting out a music video.
The music video has very high production values.
Yeah, but I mean, so do ISIS beheading videos.
Do they?
Scott, back me up on this.
I believe you.
I'm sorry, what? No, you're not wrong. I'm sorry.
Do they have lighting and...
Yeah, kind of.
They have amazing...
Some of them don't look that bad. Yeah. Those boys have figured out how to use a camera.
Kidnapping Wes Anderson and putting him in force.
They probably use very...
When did they kidnap Wes Anderson?
Cameras.
They practice kidnapping people?
No, I said they've had a lot of practice kidnapping people.
Yes. Okay, I thought you were alluding to some conspiracy theory that it wasn't real and that not Joe Biden, I mean John McCain. That was a theory for a long time. Conspiracy theory. I've been in this shit for a long time, Joe.
All I'm saying is that if ISIS can make really good propaganda, we probably could too.
Yeah, why not?
Most of our entertainment is.
I mean, the US does have a huge budget for recruiting people to the Army and Navy and Air Force, which are all different.
Just like we fucking talked about with that Godsmack.
Ivan Etniaj. Anyway,
yeah.
So that's that.
What about Godsmack?
Dun dun dun.
So I've got one last thing that you can't make up, which is
can't make this shit up.
The teenage daughter of former Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway, whose name is Claudia Conway, and she's 15. She has a TikTok account.
Yeah, I watched them all last night.
Oh, nice.
God.
Yeah, maybe you saw this. It's pretty great. She's increasingly a thorn in the side of the Trump administration. She broke the news of her mom's.
I mean, I not her whole TikTok. I mean, just the ones of her sick.
Yeah, sure, Scott. Yeah.
Arguing with her mother.
Yeah, sure, that's believable.
It is actually.
Likely story.
Fucker.
Likely story.
I watched them last night.
me a liar?
Basically, she's making Kellyanne Conway look like a pretty shitty mom. No one is really surprised. Apparently, Kellyanne Conway's husband and Kellyanne Conway famously hate each other as well, I have just learned. But yeah, Claudia Conway still has a TikTok account, and she has made posts kind of contradicting the Trump White House narrative about Trump's health. I don't know. She's a Zoomer. And this fucking Business Insider article that I'm looking at, which is written by the guy who made all the tweets.
All you need to know is it rocks. It rocks.
Yeah, she's an important political figure in her own right and has a bigger and more relevant audience than most mainstream journalists and broadcasters, says Penny Anders, a doctoral researcher in information, media, and communication at the University of Sheffield.
I'm not going that far to say that. I'm just saying it rocks. Her TikTok rocks. She's arguing with her mother.
It'd be premature to start saying like Comrade Claudia.
Yes, it would be. She still has a lot of the same beliefs.
There's a couple more steps from like science is real to upper middle class thing, or ruling class is actually just exploiting us. There's like 2 more judgments, but we're getting there.
Maybe we should reach out to her.
You know what? It's a process. She'll get there. Just give it time.
We're here for you, Claudia. Yeah. Whenever you decide, come over to the light side.
Better healthcare, or at least we want to.
Come over to the red side. Fuck the light side.
She probably has very good healthcare as a...
Yeah, I realize that now.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Who is that?
It was Nancy Pelosi.
Okay.
She
somebody reset Nancy Pelosi's
and
chip
she got
in her
confused
brain.
as to what day. She like basically like short circuited on live TV.
Oh god.
It's like someone like hitting ketamine a little too hard, and then the brain just kind of reboots and like, oh, hello.
I've been there. Anyway, that's all for me. Hope for more burb content in the future.
Burb memes.
Burb content. Always love to see it.
Burbs.
Truly.
They would mug you every chance they got. They would rip your fucking feet off.
I got
Do you want to talk about some Rabid Radlibs?
Yes, I would. I'm Jesse, and this is Rabid Radlibs.
Do it.
What am I gonna do with the
Alright. So...
Oh no, you okay, Joe?
Yep, fine.
Gonna murder him one day.
You will be the death of me, Scott, but that's okay.
This one really was just galaxy brain shit, but I'd have to cover it because Joe was talking about monopolies earlier, and it's related. So, the galaxy brain take that I'm covering today is, quote, boycotting Uber/Amazon is ableist. And the goal of
Not this again.
Yeah. We have to, man. We have to cover this. So the goal of this analysis is to thoroughly refute this point and to help the listener understand how the capitalist mode of production exploits contradictions between oppressed communities to generate profits for the bourgeoisie. So the first point that I'm going to make is I would wager that the corporations themselves are responsible for initially pushing this idea on consumers. But for whatever reason, the public just kind of gobbled it up and regurgitated the message at face value. Given it was the workers leading the boycott initiatives, refusing to legitimize their labor strike indicates that those workers owe us their labor, which I would say is equivalent to saying like shut up and drive or shut up and work. Although Amazon and Uber are, I guess you could call them monopolies, more so Amazon than Uber, there are alternatives to those services in nearly every imaginable case. But if there weren't, and if Uber and Amazon were true monopolies, as in occupying so much of the market that no other capitalist would have the capacity to enter, or I guess if there was no more room for any other capitalist to enter, let alone attempt to compete, then that would be an even more dangerous problem to grapple with. We're not there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. Temporarily,
but not quite.
Not quite. Temporarily participating in such boycotts may be an inconvenience for people who have the money to afford services on a regular basis, but many disabled individuals don't have access to or money for access to those services at all. Given that the public sector ought to be responsible for facilitating transportation services, if not subsidizing private corporations for that express purpose at a minimum, relinquishing our proletarian bargaining power to the private sector is an inadequate solution for workers and customers alike. And so I would like to make a plea. If you are disabled and unable to find an alternative service, a private competitor with better labor practices, a mutual aid volunteer, or a friend willing to give you a ride or deliver groceries, what have you, no working class ally will defame you for making sure your basic needs are met. If you are not disabled, but concerned about someone with a disability, and you have the means to help them out, please do. And so to do a little bit more research on this, I read through the ADA in its original and amended forms. That's the Americans with Disability Act. It's pretty clear that the bill is focused primarily on incorporating disabled consumers into the existing framework for capitalism, which is pretty similar to how the 13th Amendment prevents discriminatory disenfranchisement, yet nowhere else in the Constitution is there guaranteed a right to vote. There is no voter protection in the Constitution. In fact, transportation services must institute fares in order to be ADA compliant. And so here's a little theory and history primer. In the words of Lenin, antagonism and contradiction are not all one and the same. Under socialism, the first will disappear and the second will remain. Mao distinguished antagonistic contradictions from non-antagonistic contradictions in a series of essays addressing erroneous dogmatism in the CCP, and I may do a full segment on that, the nature of contradiction, in a future episode, but that's not for today. So if we pit disability rights against labor rights, we're basically intensifying a contradiction into full-on antagonism, which means we are doing the work of the class enemy, who are the true antagonists. And sort of a fun fact, during Jesse Jackson's campaign against Reagan in 1984, the League of Revolutionary Struggle, which was a Marxist-Leninist group, inadvertently outlined a comprehensive solution to this contradiction, which was to expand affordable housing and public transit to marginalized communities, including disabled people, more specifically without discrimination against disabled people, and to recognize the universal right to labor organizing. There you go. And that was Rabid Radlibs.
We love it.
Yeah.
Woo, it's great.
Do we want to talk about gender?
Oh, hell yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, what's the plan?
You forgot about the topic of the...
I forgot about gender.
They just forgot it exists.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers act like they forgot about it.
I guess we did it. That success.
Success.
I usually am just okay, I get the point. Yeah. What if everyone's a robot? Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of bizarre to think about forgetting about gender. I don't want to... Sometimes we do have a similar type of dichotomy where one side says all things about gender are innate and supremely important, and the other one seems to argue the opposite here, is that, no, gender means nothing, and you're all exactly the same and should be treated exactly equally, and that doesn't work. That just isn't true.
Yeah, I feel like that's more of a straw man, honestly. Leftists aren't that insufferable.
Some of them are.
Are they? Oh my
Some
God.
of us are.
The straw man in leftist circles most of the time. That said, it is used a lot in legal arguments, and people have tried to create equitable treatment for some things, and that is problematic. There is a huge advantage in having segregated by gender schooling, especially early on. When you have mixed gender schooling, teachers consistently allow boys to speak way more than they allow girls to speak. That eclipses over all class changes, all race, other issues. Just gender is far more important than you have a disability, what your race is, what your socioeconomic status is, whether or not you're Hispanic. And that causes a huge amount of problems later on. It doesn't hurt girls academically, but it does hurt them in actually getting a job, actually working on things later in life, actually taking risks. That verbal space is simply taught to belong to young men. And a lot of people who didn't suffer from that came out of female-only schools. And there are good and bad versions of that. I would much prefer Wellesley's definition of what a women's college should look like than some other way more problematic definitions of that. But...
Are you talking about Catholic schools?
Yeah, so Catholic schools have a really weird definition of gender that's what genitalia do you have? This is a problem. This is very much a problem. So Catholic schools are a kind of different thing in many ways. Partially, they're not just segregating schools for learning, but also in a lot of arranging social interactions. So while it is important that classroom time is at least occasionally separated, or not necessarily important, but one way to address a really, really big problem, and a reason it shouldn't be dismissed out of hand, people need to learn to interact with the other gender. They just do, or along the gender spectrum, is a better way to say that. And it is a huge problem when there is no socialization. And especially if there is socialization, but it's all in a very formulaic, romantic setup context. Dances are not how the world works. That is not how you will meet someone. Occasionally drama clubs would be mixed, but Catholic schools have very intentionally kept the roles of girls and boys whenever they are mixed. And that is also a huge, huge problem and ruins a lot of the point that it's trying to, like, a lot of the benefits of actually segregating classes by gender. And I don't want to, like, say that it's a good thing to segregate classes by gender. We should also just teach teachers to allow girls to speak in class. Other notes, just like if you're looking at what movies have how many speaking roles or how many spoken lines for boys versus how many spoken lines for girls. I'm going to pick some of the worst offenders here. So Toy Story, the original, had 3 spoken lines by women. It was a joke by Mrs. Potato Head to Mr. Potato Head that she was waiting for him always. There was a joke by Barbie, who Mr. Potato Head kept speaking over her, saying that he was a married spud. And Andy's mum screams. You can count that or not count that.
It's the peak of representation, right?
We're out for you, Pixar.
I think it's great. I just want to see these lines.
An entire movie.
Screams.
But not just is that the entire movie, but also that is considered a good kids movie. A kids movie for everyone. Not just a boys-only weird dramatized world kids movie, but a kids movie for everyone and who's allowed to speak. Versus if you look at movies that are basically entirely women, you don't see that they are attended by men ever. I wish that wasn't the case, but there isn't a blockbuster hit in them. If you're looking at movies that people think of as girls' movies, take like Frozen. Frozen has more male speaking lines than female speaking lines, despite having 2 female leads.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. All of the other supporting cast is male. And altogether, they eclipse Elsa and Anna.
That's insane. I can't believe it.
How am I not surprised by that at all?
Maybe because you're not surprised by
Because
anything.
it's fucking Disney.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's a Disney movie.
Continuing the theme from last week, it's fucking Disney. Fuck them.
So a slightly more interesting thing is if you go further back in Disney history, that isn't actually the case. More historically, women were mostly surrounded by women. So if you look at Sleeping Beauty, most of those speaking lines are women. This is a girls' movie with women speaking. Woo!
Is the dragon a woman?
Modern Disney is slipping up. Fuck 'em.
So I wasn't talking about Maleficent. I was talking about the original Sleeping Beauty, which is like the 1960s version.
Yeah, isn't there a dragon in that one?
Is there a dragon that speaks in that one?
I don't know.
I didn't think the dragon spoke in the original one. Anyway, but
she
like,
screams. That counts apparently.
And if you look at some of like more historical for everyone movies, well, Wizard of Oz is almost gender balanced. That is the epitome of historical movie Hollywood creation and has a lot more to it and a lot more interaction between genders within it than, say, Star Wars does now. In fact, Star Wars is pretty bad on gender balance split.
Yeah, Disney.
Don't get me started on the new Star Wars.
New or old Star Wars aside.
Please don't get him started.
Like,
I want to get him started, baby. I want to get him started so bad.
But we've all seen Star Wars. Gender, it wasn't marketed quite as a boys' film, but as a film for everyone. And everything is so skewed that direction that I'm picking examples here, but this is representative of a gigantic problem in culture and setup. And this doesn't, this trickles down in lots of ways, and I don't want to use trickle down in the economic sense. Just that this has huge effects in terms of, well, who gets Academy Awards? So who's won these in the past? Well, it's male directors and male everything else making movies for men. Not movies that exclude women exactly, but movies with a very male view of how the world is and should be presented. And Occasionally there's reasons behind it that are kind of terrifying and horrifying, and I am really sad and upset to hear about all of the problems with Pixar that we know in retrospect, and it drove women off because there was a sexual predator there in a very high position. But
fuck Pixar.
That sounds like fucking every single movie enterprise in the recent history.
Every single industry has them, really. I think if you just get up high enough, people don't face consequences. I don't understand, but it seems like the case.
Well, I mean, I think that goes back to...
Fuck you, John Lasseter!
I think it goes back to the episode where we were talking about mental health, about how, our society rewards those who are willing to stab people in the back, and how most people who are at the top, more often than not, tend to show antisocial behaviors, or antisocial tendencies, and therefore have less qualms about doing things such as that.
Yeah.
Well, there's still people at the bottom that don't seem to give a shit. I want to put some responsibility on the working class to hold men in power responsible.
Yeah, and men not in power are responsible as well.
I should also note here that while men get a lot more opportunities to speak, there are substantial problems. And it's not like when people talk about trying to fix gender balance issues, there are huge problems that arise in men because of this. We have taught men not to be able to interact with people who aren't men. The threat of violence when single gender male areas is incredibly high. And that is a huge problem because it very much tightens and strictens, makes very, very strict what masculinity is, and a very violent and problematic form of it. And toxic masculinity hurts a lot of people, but mostly men. There is men on women crime and men on non-binary folk crime, but there's a lot of male on male violence. And when people can't get that out and don't have a way to actually be heard because talking does not make you heard, then you end up with a huge, gigantic and problematic rate of suicide, which is sad. Not helpful either. And a lot of the coping skills that we teach just aren't allowed in the culture that is pushed down, especially upon men, though to some extent upon women too, that you shouldn't spoil yourself. Why would you be a wuss? You shouldn't need nice, soft things. Or that next level of self-care when you reach out and talk to people and build bonds just doesn't really exist or isn't taught because there's so much danger in it actually being vulnerable. Or
yeah, because if you do that, you're a pussy.
You're super gay.
Those.
Clearly, I didn't get the memo.
Yes, you have all overcome this, and thank you very much for not being scary or forcing horrendous ideas.
Pretty scary.
Jesse's a little bit scary.
I got snake bites, and I can do
spooky boy.
I can do death growl.
Scary, the fellow metalhead does not equal scary. Sorry.
Okay, all right, fine.
You are a person who I imagine standing at the edge of the mosh pit so I can stand behind you and have a good view of the stage.
Okay, that's fair. I appreciate that.
You're a protective force.
I'm a metalhead, but I'm a cat dad first.
Yes. Protection and that as a strength is actually really cool as a way that it's portrayed in masculinity. And I don't want to say that's wrong because it's actually really helpful and neat. And a sense, there is definitely a place for independence, and there is definitely a place for what used to be introspection and reflection and meditation as part of masculinity. And that's pretty cool too. It's just that tends to be eclipsed by all of the bad stuff. And we have created a system in which all of the bad apples rule over all of the good ones and try and infect everyone with their hustle culture and your value is your work and your don't rely on other people, be independent. And that super sucks. And then people don't fit in the binary. And that's also really frustrating.
Oh, hell yeah. Let's talk about that.
So, as people on this podcast may or may not know, I prefer they pronouns. And, there's a couple of ways this comes up. But gender is how you act. Gender is who you are. Gender is nothing to do with the genitals you happen to have. And while we generally assign people gender at birth based on the genitals they have to have, and since 5 years ago, throw parties that start bonfires and problems about that, that doesn't necessarily fit or work. and tends to create a mold that doesn't really apply. I am no worse at building IKEA furniture for being female, and that has nothing to do with femininity. That said, there's a lot of things that because I present female, people assume about me that are simply not true. I'm a math major. I am way, way better at the analytics and data stuff than I am at the feelings things. I have to think explicitly about the feelings things. Sometimes I mess up the feelings things. I'm not so good at that social grace. I probably never will be. That's okay. That doesn't really lie on the more traditionally feminine spectrum. And you know what? I can live not being a great host. My job is taking out the trash. My partner is a way better cook. Don't know why people on like Women's Channel and at work used to poke me and assume that I could cook. That's really weird. I can't cook.
That gives me real bad vibes. Like, ugh.
There's occasionally I like to dress up and look cool. Most of the time, I'm a metalhead. I'm trying to present as a metalhead. And people will look at me and be like, emo? No, that's not what I'm going for. Occasionally people will misremember things that I do. So I can, help people with tasks around their house, like installing air conditioners, moving heavy furniture. And people will just kind of imagine that a housemate did it. And that's also really frustrating. I like helping brew beer. I'm not actually very good at drinking it because meds. But brewing beer is like fucking great. I'm allowed to swear here, right? I think I'm allowed to swear here. And that I end up falling far more towards traditionally masculine interests than traditionally feminine ones. And there isn't space for that, though there's certainly a lot more space for people assigned female at birth than people assigned male at birth to drift.
I need to tell on myself. When I was little, I painted my fingernails sometimes, and I was a butterfly for Halloween in first grade.
That's beautiful.
That's great. I wish everyone had that chance.
And then in high school, when all my friends were girls, the upperclassmen called me faggot. Actually, they didn't just call me faggot. Somebody wrote it on the wall in Sharpie, and my art teacher made me get rid of that. So, again, Gloucester Public Schools.
Yeah, so for my first Halloween, after I could buy my own costumes, I bought myself a banana costume. I went to work with it with a whole bunch of bananas and offered to let people eat my children. No one ate the bananas.
I love that. I love it.
Very good, yeah.
I was told I was not supposed to scare people on Halloween, and I'm kind of disappointed because it's Halloween.
Isn't that the whole point of the holiday?
I thought so. I actually thought so.
And it wasn't a sexy banana, right?
I just missed I somehow must have missed something because I put this together as the point of the holiday is to have people eat your children.
Oh, baby. I love it.
So I dressed up as a banana, like in a head-to-toe yellow banana costume. Like weird padding. It was weirdly hot. I do not recommend padded costumes on Halloween and warm days in warm offices. I brought in like a whole bundle of bananas, like 5 or 6 bunches. And I went up to people and was like, would you eat my children?
That is much more wholesome.
It's just great.
Wholesome.
Hilarious.
Just bravo.
It's like low level fucking, not even low level, it's like Cronenbergian, like to the fuck, it's amazing, dude. I love that.
Awesome. I exactly what Scott just said.
I love it.
That's a high level idea if ever there was one.
Oh man, yes, it was.
If the dial of ideas returned to low for the last few years, it's quickly moving into the hot position.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey, if you want to believe in aliens, I'm cool with that. I still love you. I don't.
Anyway, so my humor tends to work a lot better for people who identify as male. I tried to make a whole bunch of female friends in high school/college. They all turned out to be men, actually. So yeah, that's what happens if you go looking for spaces with weird gender and everyone's trans. And that's okay.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Everyone's trans. Were these friends of yours like also math majors or just for curiosity's sake?
Math hacker types that just were looking for a place to hang out. Not particularly much more than that.
I'm not going to lie. It always struck me as weird when people tried to create a gender binary, like just based on physical differences between people, because like even physical gender expressions as per human hormones is a spectrum. Like you can have testicles and breasts. you can have undescended genitalia entirely.
Definitely. It's called diversity of sexual development. You can have XX, you can have XY, you can have as many X's as you want. They do not make you super female. They kind of, anything, you look more androgynous most of the time. Having XXY generally causes many other problems. Still would very much look male. That said, there's also many different ways that hormones affect people, and you can have multiple different sets of genes. So some people will fuse with twins in utero and have multiple sets of genes. Also true of women who have given birth. Very, very common for some of their children's DNA to be part of them. Have boosts of whatever if it happens to get in the right places. Stem cells go everywhere and repair things. Depending, you can have higher or lower testosterone. So someone who is XX can have high testosterone and develop something that looks very much like a penis, even though, and like the wolf are two different systems which inhibit each other. One is created by testosterone, one of which is created by estrogen. And they inhibit each other, or they make it harder for the other to grow. It's very, very rare that you'd have both a uterus and testicles, but like technically possible if you have two different sets of DNA. Very, very rare. That said, very rare doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's also really interesting how other groups have come to deal with this. There are places where it is a relatively common thing that it's an XY diversity of sexual development where testosterone is actually very, very low until around the age of 10 to 12 when puberty starts or slowly happens. So it's testicles or stones at 12. And suddenly someone who was thought to have been female up until 10th or 12th birthday is very clearly not. And because those communities and societies are kind of used to it by now, this is a thing that can happen. The transition is relatively smooth from identified outwardly as female to identified outwardly as male. And yes, there's a lot of things with chest that are very, very different too. There's also brain differences, not the brain differences that people think about. So like male brains are typically larger. The male body is typically larger. They have more holes in them, but they weigh more overall, but there's more fluid. And that has its own set of more common mental health concerns versus people who are identified as females. Generally smaller brains, generally, if you're looking at number of neurons, they're basically equal. If you're looking at like how well they actually compute things, basically equal.
Brain size does not.
Brain size doesn't really go with that.
Smart.
Nope.
Like nothing to do with that, which should be very, very clear here.
The average Neanderthal brain was like significantly larger than the average human brain, and that didn't really account for like level of intelligence.
Right. So should be very clear that that doesn't correlate. Patterns of like development, there are like most brains you could not tell looking at them whether they're male or female either. You can classify about 10% of the brains and be pretty sure, but it's really, really hard to do that too. Oh, so that said, if you're looking at more common disorders, there are some disorders that are far more common in men and some disorders that are far more common in women. DPD is something that's way more common in men. Most of the anxiety disorders are far more common with women. And if you're looking at people who identify as trans, they generally have the disorders more associated with their gender identity. So someone who's male or female is more likely to have anxiety and less likely to have DPD.
My understanding from a friend who used to, I think, had some neuroscience training and was also trans, was that the latest, like the most up-to-date theory is that you can be exposed in the womb to, for example, like a whole bunch of progesterone, which is an androgen. And that's how they think that some like assigned female at birth people, like, myself and yourself, wind up with brains that are quote unquote male in some way. And it's very weird to me because it took me a very long time to figure it out. I had to do a lot of drugs to figure this out. But I do feel like I'm a dude. Like my mind is a dude, but I'm in an AFAB body. And the hormone theory is the only one that I've heard to explain that. and I have a really hard time finding supplemental evidence. So I just have to believe my friend.
Yeah, that one's always really, really hard to test, unfortunately, because we're not getting... So there's 2 types of studies we can do. We can find people who are trans now and try and figure out things about their past, or we can find people who are being born now and guess for the future whether or not they're trans and find out in a little bit.
You know what? Remember the study where there was a person who could smell Alzheimer's and they smelled correctly? Yeah.
Sounds like an episode of the X-Files.
They need to get that. They need to get a person who
me.
can smell brains.
The brain.
Everybody come and smell. We need someone to
Joe,
come
are you
smell
afraid
Joe.
you have Alzheimer's, Joe?
Oh, fuck.
God.
Because I mean that person correctly diagnosed Alzheimer's in somebody before they developed Alzheimer's.
Kids are actually very, very good at figuring out identity very, very young, and generally around the age that people realize that, oh, gender is permanent, which is close to 5. Kids know that they do or don't fit their gender identity. And it's not that it isn't flexible to some degree, but we see very, very often that adults who are now coming out as trans, definitely, as a person who was assigned male at birth, played with a whole bunch of Barbie dolls and dresses and wanted to do dress-ups and really wanted to play house and do more verbal interactions. And people who are only now coming out as masculine or are masculine they wanted to play with trucks when they're little. Unfortunately, that's still not a universally accepted thing, which is really sad and really problematic.
I still kind of want to push back on that a little bit because, I'm definitely male, but when I was younger, I identified more with females because we talked about feelings and shit. It was always easier for me to make female friends, or I guess people who at that time identified as female. I don't know where they're at now, just because I feel like girls have more emotional intelligence than young boys do. I don't know how much of that is taught.
So it is taught, but also something that I'm always thinking about that doesn't really get talked about that much is that there is a degree of personality, as far as we can tell, which is innate. It's called temperament. It's inherited. And you can, within the wide variety of temperaments that you can have, there are actually some that we think of as more stereotypically masculine or stereotypically feminine, but you can wind up with, being quote unquote good at whatever your particular temperament makes you good at, regardless of your assigned sex or your gender identity. And that there's a lot of variation there. But you personally, I think, actually have a slightly more stereotypically feminine temperament than a lot of guys. But I've also been friends with tons of guys, straight cis guys like yourself, who have the same temperament.
Yeah, it's almost like I grew up with a feminine palette. You know what I mean? My interests were kind of pulled together from that because I played with trucks, sure, but one of my friends wanted to pretend he was in the war, and I was I was fucking creeped out. It just seemed like a weird thing for a kid to be doing, reenacting, I don't know, the Revolutionary War. It just seemed bizarre to me, but like I said, I had no problem with painting my fingernails. I didn't enjoy dolls or action figures, so I can't really say either way with that. Wasn't too much of a fan of dress up, but I was creative, you know what I mean? I was a creative kid. So I never thought of anything as being male or female particularly. I didn't understand that we were supposed to be, I guess, different.
Right, and creative expression is not inherently male, but in our society, we're sort of socialized to believe that it is. I actually keep thinking about, so I do Bollywood dance, and Indian society has a lot of really bad issues with toxic masculinity, so there's probably not much of a lesson to be learned there, but it's really striking to me how much more normal it is for dudes to dance and express themselves creatively, at least in that way.
Joe, mute.
Yeah, what you doing there, Joe?
Oh, never mind.
What the fuck type of response is that, my friend?
What does that mean? You just... What?
Sidebar. Can the person who's also...
Oh my god!
Can the person who sniffs Alzheimer's come and sniff me? Because that's what I was trying to say earlier.
You already said that, buddy.
Oh, right. See? Just exactly.
Oh, man.
What the fuck? Oh, my God.
Dodson.
Now we have to keep both
We've
of
got
those
Dodson
in there.
here.
Yeah, that's gonna have
Anyway.
to be the supercut. Anyway, go on.
Okay, so, like, first there's, like, two different things here. One of which is choice of playmate and choice of toy are separate things. And can be studied separately as kind of an interesting thing. So in terms of what, there is some studies from, I think they're from the Netherlands, on young girls with CAH. CAH is a condition in which there is extra testosterone in young girls. So they'll have like slightly larger clitorises, be slightly more physically active, generally be more interested in physical play. Your choice of playmate doesn't really matter, or will often be same gender, like as female. I should note, there isn't a particularly higher rate of anyone being trans or being CAH versus not. It's probably slightly more likely that the vast majority of people who have CAH as young children identify as female when they're adults. So when we're looking at young kids, these tend to end up being kids who prefer very physical activities, and that does seem to be very much linked with testosterone. So choice of activity is male there versus choice of playmate, which is a substantially different thing. Generally, choice of playmate gender-wise is not an indication of your own gender, except when it's a part of identity formation.
That might have actually been a pretty big aspect in my earlier stages of development, because I'm not like a sports guy. It was very difficult for me to fit in with boys because they were good at soccer. I fucking sucked at anything that involved physical activity where I was primarily using my feet.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. And I also don't want to say none of these things are binary, and if you are always identified as male and think of yourself as male, that's valid. And you're allowed to think of that no matter what. I don't want to there's a whole bunch of studies on what might be different, but we're only now just getting kids coming out as trans who have been followed since they were very, very young, and we won't have good or looking into the future studies for a very long time, unfortunately, or at least another 5 years.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I feel pretty solidly male, but who knows? I don't know. What do you think, Scott? Thanks for the feedback, bro.
Wait, what just happened? What just happened?
Nothing. I'm kidding.
Did I drop out?
I don't know. Did you? Did you pass out?
Did you not hear me say anything?
Did you black out?
No.
I said, oh, shit, I'm sorry. Well, if you feel confidently male, then I guess you're confidently, that's fine. Again, that's valid. I feel the same way. I feel like I feel the same feel in your identification. So,
Hey, if you want to believe in aliens, still love you. I don't care.
So it's fine.
I guess it's kind of strange for me because I don't feel masculine, and I've talked about this. I often feel emasculated, but I definitely feel like a man, if that makes sense. Which I think a lot of it goes back to very sort of primitive roles that we've assigned ourselves. Not primitive as in apes primitive, but just old societal narratives that we continue to take up because it's convenient for power dynamics.
Yeah, and those of us who grew up in the 90s, it doesn't sound like it was that long ago, but shit was different. It was a different time.
Absolutely.
For sure. And I don't know. I agree with you. I think part of the reason it took me so long to get my gender figured out was that I have a pretty feminine temperament, stereotypically feminine temperament, and I mostly used to just experience dysphoria in the form of sort of ickiness about feminine presentation. There was one time when I was probably in middle school or maybe 5th grade or something, and my two best friends tried to give me a makeover. This happened to me a lot. I was not very popular or attractive. And they painted my fingernails, and a couple minutes later I just was I have to get this off. I have to get it off now. And it was always just clothes are temporary. You can get them off easily. And the things that gave me dysphoria were things that you couldn't get off easily. You can't just take your hair off and put it back on. You can't like makeup more permanent makeup like eyeshadow. I never liked eyeshadow. And it was weird because there was just like this sense of womanness feeling alienated from being a woman, but never quite sure how. It's very weird. I don't identify as a trans man, so my gender is a little bit weirder than most people's. I think partially it's also that my dad didn't spend a lot of time with me growing up, or ever really. And I was raised by my mom and my sister, who are very, very stereotypically feminine cis women. And they were always like, oh, your hair's so pretty long. Why don't you wear it down? Why don't you wear this dress? Kind of thing like that. So I didn't have a lot of, I was not a very rebellious kid. I was definitely a huge doormat. So I kind of I don't know. My favorite story is when I was 17, I finished high school. I was like, I've wanted a pixie cut haircut forever. And I went to my barber, who was a dude, a straight dude even. And I was like, I want a pixie cut. And he was like, oh, your hair's too thin above the ears. It wouldn't look good. I'll give you a bob instead. So I had a bob for 6 years.
Oh, no.
It was horrible. It was okay. I don't know. I wish he had just given me the pixie cut. And maybe I could have decided to shave my head a few years earlier than I did.
I also feel really weird about my hair because I really like having long hair. And also I want to be able to headbang and windmill and all of the awesome things that go with that.
Yeah.
But that is not the thing that people see when they see someone who presents mostly feminine with long hair. And it's not that I mind being pretty sometimes, but also it's fucking metal is all hell. I'm a Viking. I'm totally a Viking.
I've had men tell me that from behind I look like a woman. I mean, I do kind of have tits. I'm fat, so I have tits. But I have long hair too. And I don't feel like that makes me feminine.
Yeah.
It's mostly just I was too cheap for a haircut.
One of my favorite comedians, Chris Fleming, who's a Massachusetts native, I think he grew up in Stowe or something. He has this great story about, he calls it a poodle shag or something. He's got foofy shoulder length hair, which really does look kind of feminine. I think he does that intentionally. And he says he was walking down a street in, I think, Stowe, and some guy in a pickup truck pulls up next to him with his window down, like he's been watching him, and he's just trying to evaluate what his deal is. He looks at him, he goes, nope, and then he drives away.
Well, you know what? I feel vindicated in that Scott told me I was beautiful last episode, so...
You are beautiful.
Thank you.
And your segment is just as good as mine.
Thank you. Humility.
That's what it's all about here.
Anyway, so if you don't know someone's gender, ask, or at least ask what pronouns they use, and please don't make assumptions. If you mess up, don't apologize for more than 30 seconds. That's really annoying. And thank you all for talking, because this is really cool.
Fuck yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. You have helped me more than anybody else with being mindful of...
Let me just tell you, this was a fun fucking podcast. It was fun.
It's appropriate. I've got.
It was appropriate.
I'll give you points for that one. But Kit, I have to thank you for being you've been really cool. You've been a very good mentor in that when I think about somebody's name, I think about their pronouns as well. That's a new thing for me. That's a year 2020 thing for me. And it's helped immensely. My conception of gender has changed in a way that I don't think it would have if we hadn't had sort of privately talked about it and talked about gender norms and pronouns.
I'm glad. I appreciate that.
I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult to change the way that I just thought about people. And with practice, the way that I think now, it's honestly a lot simpler, I'm not doing any guesswork. I can just ask people, what pronouns do you use? And then once I know, that's it. I don't have to it's really not that hard.
It's not that hard.
And it means a lot to be heard and seen in the way that actually represents identity and not to have people guessing at that.
The Zoomers are really good at this, actually.
Yeah,
we love the Zoomers.
The Zoomers are great.
They're great at TikTok. They're great at getting pronouns.
They're great at exposing Kellyanne Conway for being a piece of shit.
Yes.
Sidebar.
And getting her family sick. That's so mean.
Yeah, that's fucking awful.
Eat my children.
Will you?
My children.
My children.
Hey, if we're going to talk about eating children, then fuck it. I'm going to recommend
Comrade Scott tells you what to watch.
for a movie to watch. I'm going to recommend fucking David Cronenberg's The Brood. It's one of my favorite Cronenberg movies. But I also want to recommend a very weird Canadian movie from the 90s called Pin. It also has it actually does have some themes about gender and identity, and it's a very strange movie. It makes you feel very uncomfortable. And those are what I'm going to recommend this week. Do we have anything else, folks? Friends?
Yeah, I saw something this week. I watched Hereditary again this week.
Countrymen. Oh, that's a good movie.
I watched Hereditary last night, and it was even better the second time. Like you said, I think it surpasses
scary.
It surpasses the typical. Shut the fuck up. God, you know what? I'm not even gonna say it anymore.
It's a good movie, or so I'm told by you right now.
Watch it.
I ran out of Big Mouth to watch, so I can't tell people to watch Big Mouth anymore.
Watch Race. I've been standing this movie for so long, but it's so good, and it gets at least it got under my skin the way that Hereditary did.
What is this called?
Grace. It's an independent film. The trailer kind of makes it look like a sort of zombie movie, but just unique plot dynamics, very unsettling, like the kind of emotional experience where you feel like you need to take a shower, but also very well acted. It's just a really well done movie.
Very nice. Segment's getting very long.
Whatever.
We love it, though. I love it.
You love to see it.
I love it.
True.
We love it. We love it, folks. I can't do Trump. What?
I have nothing to recommend at this time.
Okay, Joe.
The Eeyore of this segment.
It's okay.
You gonna
It's
take
okay,
us out, Scott?
Do we want to be taken out?
You gonna take us out?
All right. What's up, folks? My name is Scott. You can follow me on tweets. You can follow me on Insta at DeathMullet. Don't give a fuck. Ellie, you go.
I give all the fucks. I'm the person on the show that gives the fucks. That's not true. I'm Ellie. You can find me on this podcast. It is same as it ever was. True today as it was the first time that I got on this podcast. Thank you.
Same as it ever was.
Yeah.
I'm Kit. You can find me here. That's about it. I do give fucks.
IGAF.
Joe, the floor has fallen to you.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
I am Joe.
Come on, man.
I'm Joe. I'm too tired to really give a fuck about where you can find me. Who else hasn't gone?
Joe, are you okay?
Yeah.
I don't want to get nailed. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
I'm Jesse. Listen to my SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/contingentsboston. I'm going to put new music up soon, I swear. I've been very preoccupied with this podcast. I have been playing guitar. It's been a long time since I actually put it back in its case, which makes me very nervous because I have 3 cats who love to fuck with everything that I like to use to make music. So please visit comrade-rosie.org, do the action item, visit the Getting Involved tab, donate to a mutual aid group.
Hit that tab.
And do some praxis.
Praxis.
You know you love it. You know what you want to give us.
Oh yeah, we have a Patreon.
At Epic Incredulity, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, at Epic Incredulity. We're on YouTube is what they call it. We're on YouTube. Search the Epoch of Incredulity. We are also... Fuck it. You know where you can find our podcast. All these various places. We're on Facebook as well. But we just want to say, give us your Patreon.
Give us all your money.
At Epic Incredulity.
We could use
the short name.
We could use a couple bucks.
Any money that you have.
Give us it all.
All of it.
No, give all of it to the mutual aid groups, but then give us $1.
Yeah.
Give us $1.
Or 5.
Or 5.
Trip
No, there's no raise the money. I got the money.
Okay, you got
the money.
Okay. And that's Epoch for the week. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's going in the supercut.
Incredulity.
No, we love you, Comrade.
We love you. We love you. We really do.
Look, give your money to Joe so we can get some fucking
Seriously.
medical
I'm cool with
assistance.
that. I still love you. I don't care.
Hope Big is still here.
Yeah, we might have lost all of this.
You haven't been paying attention to the literature.
Greg! Killing Joe in our own way.
Do it.
Softly.
Do it. Wet ass P word.
I can't tell which one of these are soundboards and which one of them are Jesse.
Wet ass P word.
Okay.
Wet ass P word.
Wet ass P word.
Wet ass.
Wet ass P word.
And
Oh my god. I killed him. Good lord, I killed him.
Oh my god.
You should totally use that as like promotional
Like
material.
a monetary value on actual life itself. Wow, it's just such a strange concept.
Joe Rogan is such a fucking moron.
Did you see that guy accidentally hit that moose with his car?
Yeah.
Holy shit, Jamie, pull that video up. Chimps were everywhere, and they had full freedom. If chimps were everywhere, and they had full freedom, the way people do.
Emu!
Serious problem.